My name is Emma Brooks, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes the person who tries the hardest to destroy your life ends up building it instead. But when all of this started, I wasn't thinking about revenge, karma, or happy endings. I was just trying to sell enough cinnamon rolls to pay next month's rent. 3 years ago, I quit the safest job I'd ever had. For almost 11 years, I worked as a pastry chef for a luxury hotel in Chicago. The pay was good, the benefits were great, and everyone thought I'd stay there until retirement. Everyone except me. Every morning, I'd bake desserts that sold for hundreds of dollars, yet none of them felt like mine. I had one dream. A small neighborhood bakery. Nothing fancy. Fresh bread before sunrise. Warm cookies after school. A place where people knew your name before they knew your order. My husband, Daniel, believed in that dream even more than I did. "You've spent years making someone else successful," he told me one evening. "Maybe it's time to build something that's yours." 6 months later, we emptied our savings account. Every dollar we'd spent years putting aside. Gone. We rented a tiny corner building on Maple Street that had been empty for almost 2 years. The floors creaked. The oven barely worked. The walls needed paint. But when I stood behind the counter for the first time, I didn't see an old building. I saw my future. We named it Sweet Sunrise Bakery. The first morning we opened, I woke up at 3:30 a.m. I was terrified. What if nobody came? What if I'd just thrown away 11 years of stability for a childish dream? At exactly 7 o'clock, the front door opened. An elderly woman smiled at me. "I'll take 2 blueberry muffins." I almost cried while putting them into the bag. Because she was my first customer. I still remember her name. Mrs. Evelyn Parker. She looked around the little bakery, smiled, and said something that stayed with me for years. "This place feels like home." I thought that was the beginning of my story. I was wrong. The real story started 15 minutes later. The front door opened again. A woman in her early 50s walked in without smiling. She didn't look at the pastries. She didn't read the menu. She looked at me. Then around the bakery. Then back at me. "You must be the new owner." "That's me," I said with my biggest smile. "I'm Emma." She ignored my hand. "My name is Linda Harper." Her voice was cold. "I live next door." "Oh. It's nice to meet you." "No," she replied. "It isn't." For a second, I honestly thought she was joking. She wasn't. She slowly walked toward the front window and looked outside. This street used to be quiet. I didn't know how to respond. She turned back toward me. "I hope you understand that businesses don't usually last here." I laughed nervously. "I'll do my best." She took one final look around the bakery before walking toward the door. Just before leaving, she stopped. Without looking back, she said, "You'll learn soon enough that not everyone wants you here." The little bell above the door rang as she stepped outside. I stood there, completely speechless. Mrs. Parker walked back to the counter, leaned in slightly, and lowered her voice. "Don't let Linda scare you." I frowned. Why would she? Mrs. Parker gave me a sympathetic smile. "Because, dear, she does this to every new business that opens on this street." At that moment, I thought she was simply a difficult neighbor. I had no idea that within a week, she'd make it her full-time mission to shut my bakery down. I tried not to let Linda get under my skin. After all, every neighborhood has that one person who complains about everything. I told myself she was harmless. I couldn't have been more wrong. 3 days after opening, I arrived at the bakery at 4 in the morning like always. As I unlocked the front door, I noticed something taped to the glass. It was a handwritten note. "This neighborhood doesn't need you. Leave before you waste any more money." There was no signature. There didn't need to be. I crumpled the paper and tossed it into the trash before Daniel arrived. He didn't need another reason to worry. Business was slow, but it was growing. Mrs. Parker came in almost every morning. She brought friends. Those friends brought neighbors. Little by little, familiar faces started appearing. People complimented the cinnamon rolls. The sourdough sold out twice that week. For the first time since opening, I thought, maybe we're actually going to make this work. Then the inspection started. Around 10 o'clock one Tuesday morning, a man wearing a city badge walked through the door. Emma Brooks? Yes. I'm Officer Kevin Morales with the city's Health and Safety Department. My stomach dropped. We received a complaint. A complaint about what? He looked at his clipboard. Unsanitary food preparation. I was stunned. We've been open for less than a week. I still have to inspect the premises. For nearly an hour, Kevin checked everything. The refrigerators. The ovens. Food temperatures. Cleaning supplies. Storage rooms. Every single detail. When he finished, he smiled. I honestly wish every bakery looked like this. I let out the breath I'd been holding. So, we're okay? He nodded. More than okay. As he turned to leave, he hesitated. This isn't the first complaint I've investigated on Maple Street. I looked at him. What do you mean? He gave a careful smile. Let's just say, some people have a habit of calling us. 2 days later, another inspector arrived. This time it was about parking violations. The next week. Noise complaints. Then complaints about delivery trucks. Then complaints claiming customers were blocking driveways. Every single accusation turned out to be false. But every inspection stole hours from my day. Customers noticed. One woman whispered. Is everything all right? There are city officials here every time I visit. I forced a smile. Just routine inspections. Inside. I was exhausted. Daniel found me sitting alone in the bakery one evening after closing. The chairs were upside down on the tables. The lights were dim. I was staring at the monthly sales report. We're barely breaking even, I admitted. He sat beside me. We knew the first year would be hard. I didn't expect to spend half of it proving I wasn't breaking the law. He reached for my hand. You've done nothing wrong. I know. Then don't let someone else's bitterness convince you otherwise. I smiled weakly. I wish it were that simple. The following Saturday was our busiest morning yet. The bakery was full. Sarah, the college student I'd just hired part-time, was helping at the register while I rushed trays of fresh pastries from the kitchen. For the first time. Everything felt normal. Then the front door opened. Linda walked in. She didn't order anything. She slowly looked around the crowded bakery. Then she pulled out her phone. Raised it toward the customers. And started recording every corner of the shop. No one understood what she was doing. But the smile on her face told me one thing. She wasn't collecting memories. She was collecting ammunition. And somehow, I knew the worst was still ahead. At first, I tried to ignore the fact that Linda had recorded my bakery. People film businesses all the time. Maybe she was sending the video to a friend. Maybe I was letting my imagination get the best of me. The next morning, I realized I had underestimated her. Sarah walked into the bakery holding her phone. Emma. She looked nervous. I think you should see this. She turned the screen toward me. A neighborhood Facebook group. Someone had posted a 3-minute video of my bakery. It was Linda. The title read, "Would you eat food made in a place like this?" My stomach tightened. The video was carefully edited. Whenever a customer accidentally left a napkin on a table, she'd zoom in. If someone spilled coffee, she'd replay the clip in slow motion. She even filmed me taking a tray of bread out of the oven and made it look as though I'd placed it directly on an unclean counter. None of it was true. But the editing made it seem convincing. The comments were even worse. Disgusting. Health department needs to shut this place down. Glad I never went there. This is why you don't trust new businesses. I felt sick. Sarah quietly asked. What do we do? I didn't have an answer. The damage was immediate. Monday was usually one of our busiest mornings. Instead, only 4 customers came in before noon. I stood behind the counter pretending to organize pastry boxes while secretly counting every person who walked past without coming inside. By lunchtime, I already knew. The video was costing us business. Mrs. Parker arrived around 1 o'clock. She immediately noticed the empty tables. Don't tell me. I nodded. It's because of the video. She sighed. I've known Linda for 20 years. Has she always been like this? Mrs. Parker looked out the window toward Linda's house. No. What happened? I honestly don't know. There was a time when she baked pies for every family on this street. That surprised me. Really? Mrs. Parker nodded. Then, after her husband passed away, she changed. For a moment. I almost felt sorry for Linda. Almost. Because grief may explain someone's pain. It doesn't excuse hurting innocent people. That afternoon, Officer Kevin Morales stopped by again. I figured I'd check on you. I appreciated that more than he probably realized. I showed him the video. He watched the entire thing without saying a word. When it ended, he handed my phone back. Everything in this video is misleading. So there's something you can do? He shook his head. Not unless she's making claims that are legally defamatory. I felt my shoulders drop. So she just gets away with it? Kevin hesitated. Maybe. Maybe? He smiled. Sometimes people reveal more about themselves than about the person they're trying to attack. I didn't fully understand what he meant. Not yet. That evening, just before closing, the front door opened. A young man walked inside carrying a camera around his neck. He looked around the nearly empty bakery before smiling. Are you Emma? Yes. He extended his hand. My name's Marcus Reed. The name sounded familiar. Then it hit me. Marcus Reed. The food blogger with hundreds of thousands of followers. I blinked in surprise. What brings you here? He laughed. Believe it or not. Your neighbor's video. For a split second. My heart sank. I thought he had come to prove Linda was right. Instead, he looked at the display case full of fresh pastries and smiled. I'd like to find out for myself who's telling the truth. I had watched Marcus Reed's videos for years. His reviews could make a restaurant impossible to get into overnight. Or completely empty by the weekend. So when he introduced himself, I couldn't decide whether to feel hopeful. Or terrified. I don't want any special treatment, he said with a friendly smile. Just give me whatever your regular customers love the most. I nodded. Then you're getting the cinnamon rolls. And? Our butter croissants. And? I laughed. I think that's enough food for one person. Marcus grinned. We'll see. For the next 30 minutes, I pretended not to watch him. He photographed everything. The display case. The open kitchen. The coffee bar. Even Sarah laughing with one of our regular customers. He asked questions. Do customers always see the kitchen? Yes. You don't hide anything? I shook my head. I actually wanted an open kitchen. If people are trusting me with their food, they should be able to see exactly how it's made. He smiled but didn't say anything. When he finished eating, he walked into the kitchen. Mind if I take a look? Not at all. Officer Kevin's inspections had left our bakery spotless. Marcus opened refrigerators, checked storage shelves, and even peeked inside the walk-in freezer. Finally, he closed his notebook. I've seen enough. I couldn't stop myself. So. He looked at me. So what? Was Linda right? Marcus laughed. Not even close. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of missed calls. For one terrifying moment, I thought something had happened to Daniel or the kids. Instead, Sarah was the first person to answer when I called back. Emma. She sounded like she was about to burst with excitement. Have you checked your phone? No. Marcus posted his review 2 hours ago. I opened his page. The title immediately caught my attention. I visited the bakery everyone was warning me about. Here's what I actually found. My hands were shaking as I pressed play. Marcus didn't spend the first minute talking about pastries. He talked about honesty. He showed clips of Linda's video. Then he played the unedited footage he'd recorded inside my bakery. Bright counters. Clean equipment. Fresh bread coming out of the oven. Customers laughing over coffee. Then he looked directly into his camera. I've reviewed hundreds of restaurants over the years. He paused. And this may be one of the cleanest small bakeries I've ever visited. I covered my mouth. I couldn't believe it. By the time I reached the bakery, there was a line outside. Not 2 or 3 people. More than 30. Cars filled both sides of the street. People were taking pictures in front of our sign. Someone shouted. That's Emma. Another customer applauded. I stood frozen on the sidewalk. Daniel wrapped an arm around my shoulders. You'd better unlock the door. I laughed through tears. I don't think we baked enough. He smiled. I don't think anyone could have. By noon, every loaf of bread was gone. Every cookie. Every cupcake. Every cinnamon roll. For the first time since opening. We had completely sold out. Sarah collapsed into a chair, laughing. I've never seen anything like this. Neither had I. But across the street. Standing behind the curtains of her living room window. Linda was watching. She wasn't angry. She looked confused. Her plan had worked perfectly. She'd gotten thousands of people to notice my bakery. The only problem was, they'd decided to trust their own eyes instead of hers. And something told me Linda wasn't about to accept defeat quietly. For about 2 weeks, life felt almost unreal. Every morning, there was already a line outside before we unlocked the doors. By lunchtime, half the display cases were empty. By closing time, everything was gone. People drove across the city just to try our cinnamon rolls. Some customers even brought Marcus's review up on their phones and asked me to sign the bakery box like I was some kind of celebrity. I laughed every time. I just bake bread, I'd tell them. But for the first time since opening Sweet Sunrise Bakery, I wasn't wondering how I'd pay next month's bills. I was thinking about hiring another employee. I should have known Linda wouldn't let that happen without a fight. It started early one Monday morning. Sarah rushed into the kitchen holding her phone. Emma. She looked pale. You need to come outside. The front windows of the bakery had been covered with flyers overnight. Someone had taped dozens of them across the glass. Each one read, "Don't be fooled by internet fame. This bakery is a health risk. Your family deserves better." Customers stood outside reading them. Some looked confused. Others immediately began pulling the papers down. Mrs. Parker was the first. She ripped one off the window, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it into the trash. Then another customer helped. Then another. Within 5 minutes, complete strangers were cleaning my storefront together. I hadn't asked a single one of them. One man looked at me and smiled. We know the truth. That sentence meant more than he probably realized. Around noon, Officer Kevin Morales stopped by. He examined one of the flyers carefully. "Do you have security cameras?" I nodded. "Inside and outside." "Good." He smiled. "Let's see who decided to advertise your bakery." I frowned. "Advertise?" Kevin chuckled. "Think about it." He pointed toward the crowd filling the bakery. Half the people out there only noticed these flyers because someone stopped to read them. I laughed despite myself. "I guess you're right." That afternoon we reviewed the security footage. At 2:17 a.m., a familiar figure appeared wearing a dark hoodie. She probably thought covering her hair would hide her identity. It didn't. The streetlight illuminated her face as she taped flyer after flyer to our windows. "Linda." Clear as day. Kevin leaned back in his chair. "Well, that certainly makes my paperwork easier." The next morning, Linda was waiting outside her house when I arrived. She crossed the sidewalk before I could unlock the bakery. "So." She folded her arms. "You think you're famous now?" I stayed calm. "I'm just trying to run my business. This neighborhood was peaceful before you came." I looked around. Customers were already lining up. Children were laughing. People were drinking coffee outside. "It still seems pretty peaceful to me." Her expression hardened. "You don't belong here." I took a slow breath. "For months, I wondered what I'd done to make you hate me." She didn't answer. "I've realized something." "What?" "It was never about me." For the first time. She looked uncertain. Then she stepped closer and whispered, "You have no idea what I'm capable of." She turned and walked away before I could respond. I watched her disappear into her house. Something about the way she said it sent a chill down my spine. That evening, as Sarah locked the front door, she looked at me nervously. "Emma, I don't think she's finished." Neither did I. But none of us imagined that by the end of the week, Linda's next move would bring television cameras, lawyers, and the entire city to our little bakery. Linda was right about one thing. She wasn't finished. 3 days after our conversation, I arrived at the bakery just before 5 in the morning. At first, everything looked normal. Then I noticed the front flower boxes. They'd been ripped out of the ground. The patio chairs were scattered across the sidewalk. One of the large front windows had been splashed with thick red paint. For a split second, I honestly thought it was blood. My knees nearly gave out. Sarah pulled into the parking lot a few minutes later and covered her mouth. Oh my God. I didn't know where to start. Cleaning the paint. Calling the police. Explaining to customers why our bakery looked like a crime scene. Daniel gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "We'll figure it out." But I could hear the worry in his voice. Replacing that window alone would cost thousands of dollars. Officer Kevin Morales arrived with 2 patrol officers. They examined the damage while I showed them the security footage. At exactly 2:43 a.m., someone wearing a baseball cap walked into view. They carried 2 buckets. One with red paint. The other with black spray paint. They vandalized the front of the bakery in less than 2 minutes before running toward the alley. Their face was hidden the entire time. Kevin sighed. "They knew exactly where your cameras were." "So, you can't identify them?" "Not from this." I felt my heart sink. Then one of the officers walked over. "Kevin." He pointed across the street. "There's another camera." We both looked up. A small security camera was mounted above the entrance of a pharmacy directly across from the bakery. Kevin smiled. "Now that might change everything." By lunchtime, someone had posted photos of the vandalized bakery online. Within hours, local community groups were sharing them. People were furious. Not at us. At whoever had done it. Customers began arriving with flowers. One family brought homemade cookies. Another customer handed me an envelope containing money. "I know repairs are expensive," she said. I immediately tried to give it back. She refused. "No. You've brought this neighborhood together. Let us help you." I nearly cried. The next morning, my phone rang. "Emma?" "Yes?" "My name is Tom Jenkins. I'm a reporter with Channel 8 News. I'd love to tell your story." I hesitated. "I'm not looking for publicity." "I know." He paused. "But this isn't just about a bakery anymore. It's about a small business owner being repeatedly targeted." That afternoon, Tom interviewed me inside the bakery. I told him everything. The anonymous complaints. The inspections. The fake online video. The flyers. The vandalism. I never mentioned Linda by name. Not once. Because until there was proof, I refused to accuse anyone. The story aired that evening. By the next morning, people were lining up before sunrise again. Only this time, they weren't just buying pastries. They were supporting us. Several nearby businesses brought us coffee. A local florist replaced every damaged flower box free of charge. Even a hardware store owner stopped by with paint and supplies. For the first time since this nightmare began, it didn't feel like I was fighting alone. Then Officer Kevin called. "Emma." His voice sounded different. "We've reviewed the pharmacy's security footage." I stopped what I was doing. "And?" There was a brief silence. Then he said the words that changed everything. "We know exactly who vandalized your bakery." I closed my eyes. Deep down, I already knew whose face was about to appear on that screen. I was standing behind the counter glazing fresh cinnamon rolls when Officer Kevin called. His words kept echoing in my head. "We know exactly who vandalized your bakery." I told Sarah to watch the front for a few minutes and drove straight to the police station. Kevin was waiting for me in a small conference room. He placed a laptop on the table. "You should probably sit down." I did. He pressed play. The pharmacy's security camera had a much wider angle than mine. The person in the baseball cap walked into view carrying 2 paint buckets. Halfway across the street, they looked both ways before pulling off the cap. I froze. It was Linda. Clear as day. She looked directly toward the streetlight for several seconds before putting the cap back on and walking toward my bakery. There was no doubt. No blurry image. No mistaken identity. Just Linda. Kevin paused the video. "I think this is enough evidence." I nodded silently. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. A few days later, Linda was formally charged with vandalism and property damage. The story spread through the neighborhood faster than anything before it. People couldn't believe it. Many had defended her for years, insisting she was just a lonely woman who complained too much. Now everyone had seen the footage. There were no more excuses. The biggest surprise came the following Monday. The city council held a public meeting about supporting local businesses. Tom Jenkins covered the story. Near the end of the meeting, one council member stood up. "I think Ms. Brooks deserves to know something." He smiled at me. "Since opening your bakery, 3 other empty storefronts on Maple Street have been rented." I blinked. "What?" He nodded. "Foot traffic has nearly doubled. The coffee shop across the street has reported record sales. The bookstore next door has hired 2 new employees. And property owners are finally investing in renovations again." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I had spent months believing I was causing problems. Instead, I had helped bring the street back to life. As people began leaving the meeting, someone called my name. I turned around. It was Linda. She looked completely different. No makeup. No perfectly styled hair. Just an exhausted woman standing alone. Emma. Her voice was quiet. I'd like to talk. Every instinct told me to walk away. Instead, I nodded. We stepped outside. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. My husband. She swallowed hard. He opened a hardware store on this street 25 years ago. I listened. It failed. She stared at the sidewalk. We lost everything. Tears filled her eyes. 6 months later. He died of a heart attack. I'm sorry, I said honestly. She nodded. So am I. Then she looked at me. When your bakery opened. I convinced myself history was repeating. I frowned. What do you mean? I thought another business would fail. And this street would die all over again. For the first time. I understood where her fear had come from. But understanding it didn't erase everything she'd done. Before leaving, Linda looked at me one last time. I never wanted to make you famous. I smiled sadly. I know. But you did. She nodded once. Turned around. And quietly walked home. I watched her disappear down the sidewalk, wondering if that would be the last time I'd ever see her. I was wrong. Because 1 week later, she showed up at my bakery carrying something I never expected. A week after our conversation outside City Hall, life had finally started to feel normal. The bakery was busier than ever. Sarah was now working full-time. We'd hired another baker. Daniel joked that I needed a bigger kitchen before I needed another employee. For the first time in nearly a year, I wasn't waking up every morning wondering what disaster was waiting for me. Then, just after opening one Tuesday, the front door chimed. I looked up. It was Linda. The bakery went quiet. A few regular customers recognized her immediately. Sarah looked at me as if asking whether she should call someone. I simply shook my head. It's okay. Linda stepped slowly toward the counter, holding a worn cardboard box against her chest. She looked nothing like the woman who had stormed into my bakery on opening day. She looked defeated. I'm not here to cause trouble, she said quietly. I know. She carefully placed the box on the counter. I found these while cleaning my attic. I opened it. Inside were dozens of old photographs. Some were nearly 30 years old. There were newspaper clippings. Menus. Receipts. Even a faded business license. I looked up. What is all this? She smiled sadly. My husband's hardware store. I gently picked up one of the photographs. A younger Linda stood beside a smiling man in front of a small storefront. Both of them looked incredibly happy. He built everything with his own hands, she whispered. When the business failed. I packed all of this away. She paused. I couldn't bring myself to throw it out. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, she looked me in the eyes. I spent years blaming every new business that opened on this street. Another pause. But the truth was, I never stopped blaming myself. Tears rolled down her face. If I had supported him better, maybe things would have been different. I walked around the counter. Without thinking. I hugged her. She immediately broke down crying. Not the kind of tears you cry for attention. The kind you've been holding in for years. A month later, we held our first Maple Street Small Business Fair. The idea came from the city council, but every shop owner helped organize it. The bookstore. The coffee shop. The florist. The pharmacy. Even businesses that had opened because more people were visiting the neighborhood. Thousands of people came. Children played games in the street. Local musicians performed. Every bakery item sold out before noon. Just before the event ended, I noticed Linda sitting alone on a bench. I walked over and handed her a warm cinnamon roll. She laughed. "You still think I deserve one?" I smiled. "I think everyone deserves a second chance." She took a bite. Then laughed again. "I spent months trying to close this bakery. And now?" She looked around at the crowded street. The laughing families. The full sidewalks. The businesses she'd once believed would ruin the neighborhood. "I guess." She smiled through watery eyes. "I accidentally saved it." I laughed. So did I. Looking back now, people often ask me what the biggest turning point was. Was it Marcus Reed's video? The television interview? The police investigation? Honestly, none of those. The biggest turning point was deciding not to give up after someone tried to convince me I didn't belong. Because if I had listened to Linda that very first day, Sweet Sunrise Bakery would have closed within a month. The street would have stayed half empty. Hundreds of friendships would have never been made. And I would have spent the rest of my life wondering, what if I'd just believed in myself a little longer? Sometimes the people who try the hardest to ruin your dream end up giving the whole world a reason to notice it. And every morning, when I unlock the doors of Sweet Sunrise Bakery and smell fresh bread filling the room, I remember the words Mrs. Parker told me on my very first day. "This place feels like home." Now, it doesn't just feel like home. It is one.